Have you ever stopped to think about what really happened when Jesus died on the cross? It wasn't just the end of a life. That moment shook the universe. The earth trembled, the skies darkened, the dead rose from their graves. Something divine was happening. It was the fulfillment of an eternal plan, and the consequences of that sacrifice are so profound that they continue to shape our lives today. But do you know what these events really mean for your life? Today, we're going to explore the supernatural signs that accompanied Jesus' death and understand how his sacrifice transformed both the physical and spiritual worlds. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might change the way you see your faith and your life forever. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the Getting Rich with the Bible channel, turn on notifications so you don't miss any content. Leave your like and share this message of hope and redemption with someone who needs to hear it. And of course, don't forget to comment below with your thoughts. I really want to hear what you have to say. The earth trembles at the death of the Son of God. The scene is dramatic. Jesus, hanging on the cross, suffers not only physical pain, but also the agony of carrying the sins of all humanity. His final words echo through Golgotha. It is finished. At that moment, something incredible happens. The earth begins to shake. A massive earthquake rocks the region. The rocks split apart, the ground tears open, and fear spreads among those witnessing the crucifixion. This earthquake isn't just a natural phenomenon, it's a reflection of the magnitude of the spiritual event taking place. The death of the Son of God shakes creation itself. The earth, which was created by Jesus, reacts to his death violently. Imagine being present at that moment. The people who witnessed the earthquake could not ignore the supernatural significance of that event. Creation recognized the impact of the crucifixion in a way that humans often fail to understand. This earthquake symbolized the end of an era. Something was being broken, the barrier between God and humanity. The tremor of the earth was a physical representation of the spiritual upheaval happening. The sin that had separated man from God was being defeated. Jesus, through his sacrifice, was breaking down that barrier, and the very ground trembled to mark the beginning of a new age. The resurrection of the saints. Amid the chaos, another incredible event happened. Matthew tells us that after Jesus' death, tombs were opened, and many holy people who had died were raised to life. These people, who had died in righteousness, came out of their graves and were seen by many in the city of Jerusalem. Imagine the impact of seeing people who were dead walking among the living again. This event was a preview of what was to come. The resurrection of the saints symbolized Jesus' immediate victory over death. Death no longer had control because Jesus was about to defeat it once and for all in his own resurrection. These resurrected saints were a living demonstration of Christ's redemptive power. They were a reminder to all who saw them that death does not have the final word. Jesus' resurrection would be the culmination of that victory, and this first resurrection was proof of what he was about to accomplish. These saints who were resurrected represented all of us. They symbolized the hope that, just as they did, all who believe in Jesus will one day rise again to live eternally with him. Jesus' power over death was clearly and directly demonstrated at that moment, showing that no matter how powerful death may seem, it cannot defeat the power of God. The temple veil torn from top to bottom. At the exact moment of Jesus' death, another significant event occurred. The veil of the temple, which separated the Holy of Holies from the rest of the temple, was torn from top to bottom. This veil was a thick curtain that symbolized the separation between God and humanity. Only the high priest was allowed to enter the Holy of Holies once a year, to offer sacrifices for the sins of the people. The tearing of this veil at the moment of Jesus' death was one of the most significant events in the history of faith. It symbolized the end of the separation between God and humanity. Before, sin had created an insurmountable barrier between us and God. But with Jesus' death, that barrier was torn down. There was no longer a need for constant sacrifices, no longer a need for human mediators. Now, anyone who placed their faith in Jesus would have direct access to God. This act symbolizes the new covenant that Jesus was establishing. The torn veil is a sign that the way to God was open. There is no more distance, no more separation. Through Christ, all have access to the Father. Imagine the impact this must have had on the priests working in the temple that day. The veil, torn from top to bottom, showed that the intervention came directly from God. He was declaring that the old system of sacrifices was over and that Jesus' perfect sacrifice had been made once and for all. Darkness covers the land. While Jesus hung on the cross, another supernatural phenomenon occurred. From noon to 3 p.m., a darkness fell over the land. For 3 hours the sun stopped shining, plunging the region into an unusual darkness. It was a clear sign that something terrible was happening. It was as if creation itself was mourning the death of its creator. This darkness was interpreted by many as a symbol of God's judgment on the sin of humanity. During those 3 hours, Jesus was carrying all the sins of the world on his shoulders. He was experiencing separation from God, something he had never known. The weight of humanity's sins was so great that even the sunlight seemed to be obscured by it. The darkness was a sign of mourning, not only from God, but from all creation. It was a physical manifestation of the chaos that sin had caused in the world. But while that moment was dark and frightening, it was followed by the greatest light the world would ever see, the resurrection of Christ, the centurion's realization. After all these supernatural events, the earthquake, the resurrection of the saints, the tearing of the veil and the darkness, a Roman centurion who had been in charge of overseeing the crucifixion began to realize the depth of what was happening. He, who had likely participated in many crucifixions before, knew that something was different about this one. He felt the power of what was happening, and with his own eyes he saw the signs that Jesus was not an ordinary man. It was at that moment that he declared, "Truly, this man was the Son of God." The centurion, who was a pagan, recognized Jesus' divinity. This is incredibly significant because it shows that Jesus' death wasn't just for the Jews, but for the entire world. The centurion's conversion is a foretaste of the expansion of the gospel to all nations and peoples. Jesus died to save everyone, and this Roman soldier was one of the first people outside of Israel to recognize that. This moment is a powerful example of Jesus' transformative impact. Even those who were far from God could recognize his divinity. The centurion's recognition represents what was to come, a global movement of people from all nations recognizing Jesus as the Son of God. The eternal impact of Jesus' death and resurrection. Now that we have reached the end of this story, it's time to reflect on the profound meaning of everything that happened at the moment of Jesus' death. The earth shook, the saints were resurrected, the veil was torn, darkness covered the land, and even a Roman soldier recognized Jesus' divinity. All of these supernatural signs point to one central truth. Jesus' death wasn't just a simple historical event. It was a cosmic, spiritual, and eternal event that changed the course of history forever. But what does this mean for you? It means that the way to God is open. Jesus tore the veil, he defeated death, and he is offering you the chance to live eternally with him. Jesus' death wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a new age of redemption and grace. Now it's up to you to make a decision. Will you ignore these signs, or will you accept Jesus' sacrifice? He opened the way. He tore the veil. All that's left is for you to take the next step. If this message has touched your heart, subscribe to the Getting Rich with the Bible channel, leave your like, and share it with those who need to hear about this incredible sacrifice. God wants to transform your life just as he transformed the world that day. Don't forget to comment with your thoughts and share this message with the world.